The elderly man's voice cracked with terror. The night drinkers. The monsters have come at last. Seraphine stood frozen at the threshold, her hood casting shadows over the face she had hidden for 200 years. Behind her, explosions rocked the ancient station. Burning court zealots were coming. The people she'd crossed a deadly nebula to save were calling her a monster. She reached up. The heavy velvet fell to the floor. Her bioluminescent markings flared violent crimson, casting light across the white stone garden. Her voice resonated like a war drum. I am Seraphine, High Queen of the Umbra Sovereignty. I am a creature of darkness and shadow and cold void. She drew her resonance blade. And I will not hide anymore. But this moment of defiance was born from an accident so absurd it should never have happened at all. The throne room of the obsidian spire had not seen natural light in 200 years. Queen Seraphine preferred it that way. In the permanent twilight of the chamber, lit only by the cold bioluminescent vines that grew from the organic walls, she could almost pretend that the intricate glowing lines tracing across her pale skin were shadows. Almost. She stood alone before the Gallery of the First, a semicircle of marble statues depicting the ancient Umbra before the Great Silence, before the change, before her people became what the galaxy called monsters. The statues were perfect, slender figures carved from white stone faces, serene and unblemished skin smooth as moonlight, without a single glowing mark. They wore flowing robes and held star maps and musical instruments. They looked like angels frozen in eternity. They looked nothing like her. Seraphine reached up slowly, her fingers trembling as they touched the edge of her hood. The heavy velvet had become armor, over the decades a shield between her face and the truth she saw reflected in every polished surface. She pulled it back. The bioluminescent markings on her skin responded to the gesture, flickering a dull ashen blue. They branched across her temples, like frozen lightning, down her sharp cheekbones, along the curve of her pointed ears. In the dim light of the chamber, they looked like cracks in porcelain, like the visible proof of something broken. Her crimson eyes, deep as nebulae, stared at the nearest statue. A woman holding a child, both unmarked, both beautiful in their purity. The sculptor had captured a moment of joy, of hope, of a time when the Umbra had lived under a blue sun and had never needed to hunt in darkness to survive. You were what we were, Seraphine whispered to the statue, her voice a layered harmonic chord that vibrated in the still air. I am what you became when the universe forced us into the void. She hated the statues. She visited them every day. The great irony was not lost on her. She was the High Queen of the Umbra Sovereignty, ruler of 17 shadow stations and 4 deep space territories, commander of the most technologically advanced fleet in 3 sectors. Her people called her the Keeper of the Silent Gate, the Sovereign of the Obsidian Heart. She had negotiated peace treaties with her voice alone and ended border conflicts with a single strategic deployment, but she could not look at her own reflection without feeling like a mistake. The door to the throne room hissed open with the soft, organic sound of shifting membrane. Kael, her first shield and oldest friend, entered without announcement. His tall frame was encased in obsidian armor that flowed like liquid shadow across his shoulders and chest. The jagged red markings on his face glowed a steady pragmatic orange as he approached. My queen, he said, his gravelly voice carrying the weight of bad news. The council is convening early. They have questions about the energy spike detected at the edge of our sensor range. Seraphine pulled her hood back up in one smooth motion, concealing her face. The transformation was instant. Queen instead of woman, sovereign instead of the creature who stared at statues and wished for a different skin. What kind of spike? She asked. Unknown origin, high frequency. It lasted only 3 seconds before dissipating, but the resonance pattern matched something in the old archives. Kael paused, his markings shifting to cautious yellow. It matched a diplomatic frequency we haven't used in 2 centuries. Seraphine felt her own markings flicker beneath the hood. Which frequency? The call of Crimson Threshold. The ancient words hung in the air like a prayer in a dead language. The call of Crimson Threshold. The highest diplomatic protocol of the first founding, used only when discussing treaties of the utmost importance. Surrender negotiations, royal weddings, alliances that would reshape the balance of power across star systems. No one had spoken that frequency since the Great Silence began, since the Umbra had withdrawn into the shadows and locked their borders against a galaxy that saw them as nightmares made flesh. Where did it originate? Seraphine asked. Human space, a research station on the outer rim, designation Novus Point. It's located in the Dead Zone Sector 12. They're technically within Earth Command jurisdiction, but operate with minimal oversight. The station is small, fewer than 40 personnel. 40 humans, Seraphine said slowly, managed to broadcast a signal using a protocol that requires 7 years of study in the old tongue just to pronounce correctly. Kale's markings brightened to a skeptical crimson. The Council believes it's a trap, a lure to draw us out of isolation. They want to ignore the signal and increase border patrols. Of course they do. Seraphine walked toward the viewport that dominated the far wall of the throne room. Beyond the transparent obsidian, the infinite black of deep space stretched in all directions, punctuated by distant stars that looked like scattered diamonds on velvet. 200 years we've hidden, 200 years of silence, and the moment someone speaks our language, the Council wants to pretend we didn't hear it. They are afraid, my queen. They are cowards. The words came out harsher than she intended, but Seraphine did not take them back. The Council had grown comfortable in the shadows. They had convinced themselves that isolation was safety, that invisibility was the same as survival. They looked at the statues of the first and saw what they had lost. They studied their own marked skin and saw only the reasons to stay hidden. Seraphine looked at the stars and saw a cage. Prep the obsidian star, she said quietly. Full diplomatic contingent. I want to see this human station with my own eyes. Kale's markings flashed shocked violet. My queen, the Council will never approve. I am not asking for their approval. Seraphine turned from the viewport, her hood casting her face in complete shadow. Ready the ship, Kyle. We leave within the hour. Novus Point looked like a rusted tin can held together with prayers and stubbornness. The research station spun slowly on its axis at the edge of charted space, its hull pitted by decades of micrometeorite impacts and solar radiation. Antennae and sensor arrays jutted from its surface like the quills of a dying porcupine. From the bridge of the obsidian star, Seraphine could see the scorch marks where someone had attempted repairs with welding equipment that belonged in a museum. It was without question the least impressive structure she had ever considered worth a diplomatic visit. Scanning now, Kale reported from the tactical station. His hands moved through the holographic interface, pulling up data streams that glowed soft blue in the dim light of the bridge. Life signs confirmed, 38 humans. Minimal defensive capabilities. Their weapon systems appear to be, I believe the Earth term is decorative. They're researchers, not soldiers, Seraphine said. She stood at the center of the command day, her hands clasped behind her back, her posture rigid with the discipline of decades on the throne. Around her, the bridge of the obsidian star hummed with bioluminescent activity. The crew worked in near silence, communicating through harmonic frequencies that resonated through the living walls of the ship. The obsidian star was not built. It was grown. A daughter vessel of the Great Spire, its hull was composed of the same organic obsidian that formed the heart of Umbra architecture. Bioluminescent vines hung from the ceiling like an inverted garden, their leaves shimmering with soft light. The floor was warm beneath Seraphine's boots, pulsing gently with the rhythm of the ship's circulation systems. To travel in the obsidian star was to travel inside a living organism. To the Umbra, it was home. To outsiders, it was often the last thing they saw before they decided the old stories about space vampires were true. Hailing frequencies opened, the communications officer reported, her markings a steady professional green. Novus Point is responding. Audio only. They sound nervous. Put them through. The voice that crackled across the bridge speakers was female-clipped and carrying the particular flavor of authority that came from commanding a forgotten outpost at the edge of nowhere. This is Commander Reese Blackwell of Novus Point. Identify yourself and state your business. You are in restricted research space. Seraphine allowed herself a small smile beneath her hood. Restricted, as if a research station with decorative weapons could restrict anything. Commander Blackwell, Seraphine replied, letting her harmonic voice carry through the open channel. I am Seraphine, High Queen of the Umbra Sovereignty. We received a diplomatic transmission from your station approximately 6 hours ago. We have come to discuss its contents. The silence that followed was profound. Seraphine could almost hear the humans on the other end of the transmission recalibrating every assumption they had about their day. Finally, Blackwell's voice returned noticeably tighter. "Commander, to whoever's running this simulation, it's not funny anymore. Shut it down before I write you up for—" "This is not a simulation, Commander." Seraphine gestured to Kale, who initiated a visual transmission protocol. On the view screen of Novus Point, Seraphine's image would now be visible, hooded and imposing against the backdrop of the Obsidian Star's organic bridge. "You transmitted the call of Crimson Threshold using a frequency that has been dormant for 200 years. We are here to answer that call." Another silence. Longer this time. Then a different voice joined the channel, male, younger, with the particular nervous energy of someone who had just realized he was in over his head. Your Majesty, this is Dr. Donovan Thane. I'm the linguistics specialist on station. I think there's been a terrible, terrible mistake." The docking bay of Novus Point smelled like recycled air and industrial lubricant. Seraphine descended from the organic umbilical of the Obsidian Star with KL and 3 other guards flanking her. Their obsidian armor shifted and flowed as they moved, responding to muscle movements with liquid grace. Behind their featureless visors, their faces remained hidden. Seraphine kept her hood up. The reception committee was small. Commander Reese Blackwell stood at the center, a woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her uniform was crisp, despite being at least a decade out of current Earth Command regulation. Her eyes were the color of winter storms, and they tracked Seraphine's every movement with the wariness of someone who had survived too many diplomatic incidents to take anything at face value. Beside her stood Dr. Donovan Thane. He was not what Seraphine expected. The linguist was in his 30s, tall and lanky, with dark hair that looked like it had been styled by standing too close to a malfunctioning power conduit. His lab coat was wrinkled and stained with something that might have been coffee or might have been biological samples. He held a data pad in both hands like a shield. His eyes were an unexpected shade of warm brown, and they were currently very, very wide. "Your Majesty," Commander Blackwell said, executing a formal salute that was only slightly undermined by the way her hand trembled. "Welcome to Novus Point. I apologize for the confusion. We had no intention of initiating diplomatic contact with the sovereignty." "And yet," Seraphine replied, her voice resonating through the small bay, "you transmitted the call of Crimson Threshold, a frequency that requires intimate knowledge of the old tongue and precise harmonic calibration. That does not happen by accident, Commander." "Actually," Donovan Thane said, raising one finger in the universal gesture of someone about to make a situation worse, "it absolutely did. Happen by accident, I mean. Very much by accident. Catastrophically by accident." Blackwell closed her eyes briefly as if praying for patience. "Explain," Seraphine said. Donovan took a deep breath. "Well, you see, I was analyzing spectral data from a dead star system, and I was having my morning Sintcaf, which is technically industrial solvent, with delusions of being a beverage, and the gravity stabilizer hiccuped. Just a tiny little hiccup. But my hand moved, and the mug tilted, and the coffee achieved a rather graceful low-gravity arc directly into the primary transmission console of our hypercom array." He paused as if waiting for judgment. Seraphine stared at him. "You summoned the High Queen of the Umbra Sovereignty," she said slowly, "with a beverage spill." "A very bad beverage," Donovan clarified. "It's basically liquid misery, station-grade Sintcaf. The console didn't stand a chance. It shorted out spectacularly. Sparks smoked the works. And apparently in its death throes it broadcast a garbled signal that happened to match your ancient diplomatic frequency." He clutched his datapad tighter. "I'm so sorry. I've probably started an interstellar incident because I can't hold a cup steady." Kale's hand moved toward his resonance blade. Seraphine raised one pale hand, stopping him. And then, to the visible shock of everyone in the docking bay, she laughed. It was a light melodic sound layered with harmonic overtones that made the metal walls ring softly. The bioluminescent markings beneath her hood flared a brilliant amused violet, bright enough to be visible even through the heavy velvet. "You are telling me," Seraphine said, her voice still carrying traces of mirth, "that an empire emerged from 200 years of silence because a human cannot hold his coffee." Donovan offered a weak smile. "In my defense, the gravity stabilizers are temperamental." "This is absurd. But Seraphine found she did not mind the absurdity. There was something refreshing about it, something honest. In 2 centuries of careful diplomacy and calculated words, no one had ever accidentally invited her anywhere. Your Majesty, Commander Blackwell interjected clearly, trying to salvage what remained of the situation. While I appreciate your understanding, I'm sure you have more important matters to attend to. We can file an official apology through proper channels and— Commander, Seraphine interrupted gently. Did your console record the transmission before it failed? Blackwell blinked. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Thane managed to route the data to the backup systems before the primary array went completely dark. Why, PM? Because I would like to examine it. The call of Crimson Threshold is not a simple frequency. Even a random garbled signal should not have produced an exact match unless— She trailed off, an idea forming. Dr. Thane, may I see your linguistic analysis station? Donovan looked like a student who had just been asked to show his homework to the principal. Of course. It's this way. Fair warning, it's a bit cluttered. The linguistics bay was not cluttered. It was an archaeological dig of technical equipment and data storage units that appeared to have been organized according to some system known only to chaos theorists and entropy. Holographic displays flickered in midair, showing star charts, spectral analyses, and what appeared to be the conjugation tables of at least 6 dead languages. In the center of the controlled disaster sat the remains of the Hypercom console. It looked like it had lost a fight with a small electromagnetic pulse, blackened circuits, melted conduits, and a dark stain that was almost certainly the remains of the infamous coffee spill. Seraphine approached it carefully, her trained eye examining the damage patterns. Behind her, Kale maintained his position by the door hand, still resting near his weapon. Donovan hovered nearby nervously, explaining the technical specifications of equipment Seraphine understood better than he seemed to realize. Here, she said, finally pointing to a specific scorched panel, this is the harmonic resonance chamber. When the liquid made contact, it created a short circuit that would have produced a high-frequency pulse. She traced the damage pattern with one gloved finger. But that pulse should have been random noise. Unless— She turned to Donovan. What were you analyzing when the spill occurred? Dead star system, like I said. NGC 7821. It's in the Obscura Reach about 40 light-years from here. I was running spectral analysis on some unusual electromagnetic signatures we've been picking up from that region for the past few months. The Obscura Reach. Seraphine felt her markings pulse beneath her hood, a flash of shocked recognition that she quickly suppressed. The Obscura Reach was a region of space so dense with gravitational anomalies and stellar debris that even the most daring pilots avoided it. It was also, according to the old archives, the location of the first founding colonies, the places where her people had lived before the change, before they became creatures of shadow and silence, before they became monsters. Show me the data, she said quietly. Donovan pulled up a holographic display. Waveforms cascaded across the projection, showing electromagnetic patterns that fluctuated in irregular but somehow purposeful rhythms. Seraphine studied them, her mind cataloging the familiar mathematical structures beneath the surface noise. And then she saw it. Hidden within the static woven through the seemingly random bursts of energy was a pattern, not a natural phenomenon, not stellar radiation or gravitational interference, a signal. Incredibly faint, degraded by distance and time, but unmistakably there, and unmistakably Umbra in origin. Her hands moved through the holographic interface with practiced speed, isolating the pattern, filtering out the noise, amplifying the core structure. The waveform resolved into something clearer, something older, something that made her heart stop. Kale stepped forward, his markings flashing urgent crimson. My queen, what is it? Seraphine's voice when she spoke was barely a whisper. It's a distress call. Old format. First founding protocol. She looked up at Donovan, and for a moment she forgot to maintain the regal distance. How long has this signal been transmitting? Donovan checked his data logs. We first detected it about 60 years ago. It's been constant since then, just very quiet. We classified it as background radiation from the dead star. We had no idea it was artificial. 60 years. 60 years of someone calling into the void. 60 years of silence on the other end. Seraphine's fingers flew across the interface, decoding the message using linguistic structures She had studied in the deepest archives of the Spire, the old tongue, the language of the untouched before the change forced them to adapt to evolve to become something new. The translation appeared line by line. The garden is dying. The children are alone. Please remember us. The words hit Seraphine like physical blows. She gripped the edge of the console to steady herself, her markings cycling through erratic violet beneath her hood. Kale was at her side immediately, one hand on her shoulder, his voice low and concerned. My queen. It's them, she whispered. Kale, it's them. The lost colony. The Aegis of the sun. We thought they were destroyed in the burning. But they're alive. They've been alive this whole time calling for help, and no one heard them. She straightened, forcing her voice back to something resembling regal composure. Doctor, Thane, your coffee spill did not just trigger the call of Crimson Threshold. It acted as a carrier wave. It amplified this signal just enough for our long-range sensors to detect it. You didn't accidentally contact us. You accidentally helped them contact us. Donovan looked down at his ruined console with newfound respect. So, the coffee saved lives. Potentially. Seraphine turned to face him fully. For the first time since arriving on the station, she pushed back her hood. The reaction was immediate. Donovan's eyes went wide, not with fear, but with the kind of academic fascination that suggested he had spent far too many years studying theoretical concepts and not enough time preparing for them to be real. Commander Blackwell tensed but held her ground. Seraphine's bioluminescent markings traced elegant patterns across her pale skin, glowing a steady, determined blue. Her crimson eyes held Donovan's gaze without flinching. I am going to the obscure reach, she said. I am going to find whoever sent this message, and I am going to bring them home. She paused. But I cannot navigate that region alone. It is filled with gravitational anomalies that shift without warning. I need someone who understands the stellar patterns, someone who can read the old navigational charts and translate them into modern coordinates. You need a linguist who specializes in dead languages and stellar cartography, Donovan said slowly. That's a very specific skill set. It is. Do you know anyone who fits that description? Dr. Thane? Donovan looked at the ruined console, at the signal that had been screaming into the void for 60 years, at the Queen standing before him with her glowing markings and her impossible request. I can't believe I'm saying this, he said, but yes, I do. It's me. I'm the idiot who fits that description. Then you are the idiot I need. Seraphine extended one pale hand toward him. You spilled the coffee, Dr. Thane. Now you will help me answer the call. Donovan stared at her hand, at the sharp obsidian nails, at the glowing lines that seemed to pulse with light from beneath her skin. He looked at Commander Blackwell, who gave him a look that clearly said, if you get yourself killed on an alien ship, the paperwork will be a nightmare. He took Seraphine's hand. Her skin was cold, not unpleasantly so, but noticeably cooler than human standard, like touching polished stone that had been left in shadow. When do we leave? He asked. Within the hour. Seraphine released his hand and turned to Blackwell. Commander, I will need you to transmit the official diplomatic protocols to Earth Command. Tell them the sovereignty is emerging from silence. Tell them we are pursuing a humanitarian rescue mission. And tell them that Dr. Thane is accompanying us under full diplomatic immunity. Blackwell looked like she wanted to argue. But she was also a career officer who recognized when the universe had made a decision on her behalf. Understood, Your Majesty. I'll prepare the documentation. As they walked back toward the docking bay, Kael fell into step beside Seraphine. His markings glowed a quiet, concerned orange. My queen, he said softly, the council will not approve of this. You are taking a human onto the Obsidian Star. You are pursuing a signal that could be a trap, and you are doing it based on a coffee spill and 60-year-old data. I know. They will call it reckless. Let them. They will say you are being driven by sentiment rather than strategy. Seraphine stopped walking. She turned to face her oldest friend, and when she spoke, her voice carried all the weight of 2 centuries of silence. For 200 years, we have hidden in the dark because we were afraid the galaxy would see us as monsters. For 200 years, we have let fear make our decisions. And somewhere out there, Kael, our people have been dying alone because we were too afraid to hear them scream. Her markings flared bright violet. If that is sentiment, then I will wear it proudly. The council can call it whatever they want. I am going. Kyle studied her for a long moment. Then his markings shifted to a warm, supportive gold. Then I am going with you, my queen, as I always have. The transition from Nova's Point to the Obsidian Star was like stepping from a tomb into a living forest. Donovan stood at the threshold of the umbilical connection, staring into the warm, humid interior of the Umbra vessel. The air smelled like rain-drenched earth and crushed mint. The walls pulsed gently, organic and alive. Bioluminescent vines hung from the ceiling, their translucent leaves glowing with soft green light. They grew downward roots anchored in nutrient-rich soil embedded in the obsidian hull. The floor beneath his boots was warm, almost body temperature, and he could feel a gentle, rhythmic pulse through the soles of his shoes. "It's alive," he whispered. "She is alive," Seraphine corrected, walking past him into the corridor. Her hood was back up, concealing her face once more. "The Obsidian Star is a daughter of the Great Spire. She breathes with us. She feels the currents of space. She responds to our intent. You named your ship like a person, because she is a person. Or near enough." Seraphine's voice carried a note of gentle amusement. "To travel in a dead vessel of metal and circuits would be to us like being buried alive." She led him through a series of wide, curving corridors. They passed other Umbra crew members whose markings flickered in curious patterns as they saw a human walking freely through their ship. None of them looked like monsters. They looked like people. Strange, beautiful, impossibly graceful people who moved with a synchronized rhythm that suggested they heard music Donovan could not. They reached a circular door that opened like an iris. "This will be your quarters," Seraphine said. "It is attuned to your atmospheric needs. My guards will remain outside to ensure your privacy, not to restrict your movement. You are a guest, not a prisoner." The room beyond was larger than Donovan's entire apartment on Nova's Point. A bed that looked like it was made of woven silk. A desk carved from dark wood. A massive viewport showing the infinite stars. On the desk sat a translator device far more elegant than anything Earth Command produced. "We reached the first waypoint in 6 hours," Seraphine said. "Rest, Dr. Thane. The obscure reach is a place of shadows and echoes. You will need your strength." She turned to leave. "Wait," Donovan said. "Your Majesty, Seraphine. Why me? There are better linguists, people with more experience. Why would you trust a guy who ruins expensive equipment with coffee?" Seraphine paused at the threshold. For a moment, her markings brightened beneath her hood, casting soft light across the elegant features he could almost see. "Because, Dr. Thane, when you looked at me, you did not see a monster. You saw a puzzle, a language, a person." Her voice softened, losing some of its harmonic resonance. "In 200 years, I have met many warriors, many diplomats, many kings. But I have met very few people who are brave enough to be curious when they should be afraid." The door iris shut behind her. Donovan sat down on the silk bed and looked out at the stars. They looked different from here. Sharper. Closer. As if the Obsidian Star was stripping away the layers of interference that had always existed between him and the truth. He pulled up the translator terminal. It was already linked to the ship's database. Thousands of hours of linguistic data navigation charts, cultural protocols. He had 6 hours to learn everything he could about a people he had only known through myth and academic theory. He took a deep breath and began to work. For the first time in his professional life, the silence of the room did not feel lonely. It felt like a beginning. The Obsidian Star moved through space with the predatory grace of a creature born to the void. On the bridge, Seraphine stood at the commandacious, her hands clasped behind her back, her posture rigid with discipline that had been drilled into her since childhood. Around her, the crew worked in harmonic synchronization. Their voices blended into layered frequencies, conducting the ship through stellar currents with nothing but sound and intent. The bioluminescent vines overhead shifted in time with the rhythm, bright and dim, like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient. KL approached from the tactical station, his expression carefully neutral. "Long-range sensors are detecting movement, my queen. 3 vessels, bearing 27 Mark 6. They are matching our course." Seraphine felt her markings pulse beneath her hood. Identification. Burning Quartz configuration, scavenger class. They are maintaining distance, but they are definitely tracking us. The Burning Quartz. Of course. The zealots who believed that the change was a curse, that the bioluminescent markings were proof of corruption, that the only path to redemption was to reverse evolution itself. They called themselves the Ash Walkers. They spent their lives in self-imposed penance, trying to purify what they saw as contamination. And they hated Seraphine with the particular venom reserved for those who represented everything they wished to destroy. "Open a channel," Seraphine commanded. The view screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was one Seraphine knew too well. High Inquisitor Mordain. He had been handsome once before he started his purification rituals. Now his face was a map of self-inflicted scars, burn marks covering where his bioluminescent markings had once been. His eyes still crimson, like all Umbra burned with fanatic intensity. He wore robes of ash gray, deliberately plain, deliberately ugly. "Well," Mordain said, his voice a rasping, single note instead of the harmonic chorus of their people. "The false queen emerges from her hole. Tell me, cousin, what brings you out of the shadows after 200 years of cowardice?" Seraphine kept her voice level. "I am pursuing a humanitarian mission. It does not concern you, Mordain. Everything you do concerns me. You parade as queen of our people while wearing the marks of our corruption like jewels. You call yourself sovereign while embracing the very curse that destroyed our ancestors." His scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. "But I know where you are going. I know what you seek. The Aegis of the Sun, the last colony of the untouched." Seraphine felt ice crystallize in her veins. "How do you—" "I have my sources, just as you have yours." Mordain leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "You think you will rescue them. You think you will bring them into your corrupt embrace and call it salvation. But they will take one look at you, cousin, and they will see what I see. A monster, a nightmare wearing a crown. You're wrong. When they see your marks, your fangs, your eyes, when they remember what we were before the darkness took us." Mordain's voice dropped to a whisper. "They will reject you, Seraphine, just as you deserve." The transmission cut. Kael's hand was on his weapon. "My queen, he is racing us to the Reach. If he gets there first, he will harvest them." Seraphine's voice was hollow. "He will take their DNA, their genetic material. He will try to use them to reverse the change, to erase our markings, to make us pure again. Can he do that? No, but he will kill them trying." Seraphine turned from the view screen, her mind already calculating trajectories and odds. The Burning Court ships were fast-built for speed rather than comfort. The Obsidian Star was powerful, but she was also carrying extra mass in the form of rescue equipment and supplies. It would be close. "Maximum loom drive," Seraphine commanded. "I want every available resource routed to propulsion. No delays, no stops. We reach the Obscura Reach before Mordain, or we do not reach it at all." The bridge erupted into coordinated action. The harmonic chorus rose in pitch and intensity. The bioluminescent vines flared brilliant white as the ship's organic systems pushed to their limits. Donovan Thane appeared at the bridge entrance, looking disheveled and concerned. "I felt the ship accelerate. Is everything—" He stopped when he saw Seraphine's expression. "What happened?" "We have company," Seraphine said grimly, "the kind that wants to make sure we fail." She looked at the human linguist standing awkward and out of place on a bridge designed for a species he had only learned about hours ago. He should have been terrified. He should have demanded to be returned to his safe, boring research station. Instead, he walked to the navigation console and pulled up the star charts. "Then we better get there first," he said simply. "Show me the route. I'll find us the fastest path through the anomalies." Kael looked at Seraphine, his markings questioning. Seraphine nodded. Donovan Thane began to work, and the Obsidian Star, carrying a queen who had hidden in shadows for 200 years, and a human who had summoned her with a coffee spill, plunged toward the Obscura Reach at speeds that made the stars blur into ribbons of light. Behind them, 3 ships followed. And ahead of them, somewhere in the darkness, a 60-year-old signal continued to scream into the void. "The children are alone. Please remember us." Seraphine closed her eyes and made a promise to the ghost she had never met. "I am coming. I remember. You are not alone, monsieur. Not anymore." The Veil of Whispers earned its name honestly. From the viewport of the Obsidian Star, The nebula looked like a wall of violet and gold gas churning with internal storms that could crush a ship's hull like an aluminum can. Lightning arced between pockets of ionized particles, each flash bright enough to leave after images burned into the retina. Seraphine stood at the command dais, her fingers tracing patterns through the holographic interface that floated in the air before her. Around her, the bridge crew sang, their voices wove together in complex harmonic structures, each frequency resonating with different systems throughout the living ship. The bioluminescent vines overhead shifted in time with the music transitioning from calm blue to urgent amber. They had been racing the burning quartz for 18 hours. 18 hours of pushing the obsidian star to speeds that made her organic hull groan in protest. 18 hours of watching Mordaine's 3 scavenger ships maintain their pursuit like patient predators. Now at the threshold of the nebula, everything would be decided. Tactical, Seraphine commanded, her voice cutting through the harmonic chorus. Status on the quartz vessels. Kale's hands moved through his station's interface, pulling up data that materialized in glowing script. Holding position at the nebula's edge. They are not following us in. They know something we don't, Donovan said from his position at the auxiliary navigation console. He had been there for the past 6 hours, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, his fingers flying across alien controls with increasing confidence. The nebula isn't just dense, it's actively hostile. Look at these gravitational readings. There are pockets of collapsed space in there that could tear us apart. Seraphine studied the scan data. He was right. The Veil of Whispers was a graveyard. Dozens of ships had entered over the centuries. None had emerged. The nebula's gravitational anomalies shifted without warning, creating sudden wells of crushing force that appeared and disappeared like the breath of some vast cosmic entity. Mordaine is waiting for us to destroy ourselves, she said quietly. He knows we cannot navigate this using conventional methods. Then how do we navigate it? Donovan asked. Seraphine closed her eyes, reaching deep into memories of archives she had studied as a child. The first founding had lived in the obscure reach. They had traveled these currents for generations before the change forced them into exile. They had not used computers or sensors to find their paths. They had used song. Dr. Thane, she said, opening her eyes. The distress signal. Play it again. Full spectrum analysis. Donovan pulled up the waveform. The 60-year-old transmission filled the bridge with its pattern repeating endlessly. 3 short pulses followed by a long rising tone. Again and again, a rhythm that had been screaming into the void since before Donovan was born. Seraphine listened, not with her ears but with something deeper. The markings on her skin began to glow in time with the signal responding to frequencies her conscious mind could not process. It's not just a distress call, she whispered. It's a navigation beacon. They are singing with the nebula, using it as an amplifier. The gas clouds themselves are carrying the message. She turned to her crew. We do not fly against the current. We sing with it, match the frequency, become part of the storm. The bridge crew exchanged glances. What Seraphine was proposing was a technique from before the Great Silence. Before 200 years of hiding had made them forget how to be part of the universe instead of separate from it. My queen, Kale said carefully, if we harmonize with unstable gravitational fields, we will either become one with them or be torn apart by them. Seraphine's markings blazed bright violet. I know the risks, Kale, but there are people dying in there. People who have been alone for 60 years because we were too afraid to answer. I will not let fear make this decision. She stepped down from the dais and moved to the central resonance chamber, a circular platform where the ship's harmonic systems converged. It was a position usually reserved for moments of desperate need, a place where the queen could connect directly with the vessel's consciousness. Seraphine had not stood there in 50 years. She placed her hands on the organic interface. The ship responded immediately. Warmth flooded through her palms as the obsidian star's awareness touched her own. She felt the hull's 1,000 injuries from micrometeorite impacts. She felt the strain in the propulsion chambers. She felt the ship's fear of the nebula ahead. I know, Seraphine whispered to the vessel. I am afraid too, but we go forward anyway. She began to hum. The sound started low, a bass vibration that resonated in her chest. The crew joined her, adding their voices to hers, building the harmonic structure layer by layer. The bioluminescent vines flared white. The walls rippled with light that seemed to come from within the obsidian itself. Donovan watched transfixed. He had studied Umbra culture for 7 years, but reading about harmonic navigation and witnessing it were entirely different experiences. The ship was not just responding to commands, it was singing. And in the song, it was alive in a way no human vessel could ever be. The obsidian star entered the Veil of Whispers. Immediately, the universe became chaos. Violet gas pressed against the viewports like living fluid. Lightning split the darkness in jagged arcs. The gravity shifted, pulling in 3 directions at once, trying to tear the ship apart at the seams. Seraphine sang louder. The crew followed her lead, their voices rising and falling in patterns that matched the nebula's own chaotic rhythm. They were not fighting the storm. They were becoming part of it, dancing with it, letting it carry them where it wanted to go while gently suggesting a destination. A pocket of collapsed space opened directly ahead. Sensors screamed warnings. Kael's hands moved to defensive systems. "Hold," Seraphine commanded. She adjusted the harmonic frequency, shifting the resonance just slightly. The ship turned not with thrusters, but by changing its relationship with the gravitational field around it. They slipped past the collapsed pocket with meters to spare. Another anomaly, another shift, another narrow escape. Donovan's fingers flew across his console, feeding Seraphine real-time data on the signal's direction. 30 degrees port. The beacon is stronger there, but there's a massive gravity well between us and, I see it. Seraphine's markings flickered so fast they became a strobe effect. Sweat beaded on her pale skin. The strain of maintaining the harmonic connection was immense. Every muscle in her body trembled with effort. But she did not stop singing. For 3 hours it was a battle of will against entropy. Every moment brought new dangers. Every second required split-second decisions that meant the difference between navigation and annihilation. The crew's voices grew hoarse. The ship groaned with stress, and then slowly the chaos began to resolve into pattern. The seemingly random pockets of gravity revealed an underlying structure. The lightning followed predictable paths. The nebula was not chaos at all. It was a song so complex that it appeared random to those who did not know how to listen. "There," Donovan said, pointing at a stable pocket of space deep within the nebula's core. "The signal is originating from that station. It shouldn't even be there. The gravitational stress should have torn it apart decades ago." The gas clouds parted like a curtain being drawn back, and the aegis of the sun was revealed. Seraphine's voice broke. The harmonic connection wavered as her concentration shattered completely. She stared at the structure before them, her crimson eyes wide with wonder and grief. It was beautiful. The station was not built from metal or composites. It was carved from a single massive asteroid of white crystalline stone that glowed with its own internal luminescence. Spires rose from its surface like cathedral towers, delicate and impossibly graceful. Transparent domes covered gardens that still held atmosphere after 6 decades of isolation. The architecture was ancient, predating the change built in a style that the Umbra had not used in 200 years. It looked like the statues in her throne room. Perfect, unblemished, pure. It looked like everything Seraphine wished she could be. "The aegis of the sun," Kael breathed. "The great library of the first founding. We thought it was destroyed during the burning." "So did I." Seraphine's voice was barely a whisper. Her markings cycled through erratic violet, unable to settle on a single emotion. Joy, grief, hope, fear, all coursing through her in waves that left her feeling hollow. But it survived. They survived. She flexed her obsidian-tipped fingers at the glowing lines that traced across her pale skin like cracks in porcelain, at the physical proof of what she had become while they remained what they had been. "My queen," Kael said gently, "we should dock. The station's atmosphere is failing. Life support is running on emergency reserves. If we delay, I know." Seraphine forced steel back into her spine. This was not the time for self-pity. There were people dying. People who had called for help for 60 years while she hid in the shadows feeling sorry for herself. She straightened. "Begin docking procedures. Donovan, pull up the station's architectural database. I need to know where the survivors would have taken shelter." Kael, full security detail. "We do not know what we will find inside." The obsidian star extended its organic umbilical toward the white stone structure. The connection was made. airlocks sealed, atmosphere equalized with a hiss of recycled oxygen that smelled flat and tired. Seraphine pulled her hood up before anyone could comment. They walked through corridors of white stone lit by failing bioluminescent panels that flickered like dying stars. The architecture was breathtaking, vaulted ceilings covered in intricate carvings, floors of polished marble inlaid with precious metals forming star maps and mathematical equations. Every surface was a work of art, and everywhere carved figures. Hundreds of them lined the corridors. But these were not the formal, distant statues from the throne room. Here, the first founding lived in stone. Scholars bent over star charts, their fingers tracing invisible constellations. Musicians mid-song instruments raised to lips that would never breathe again. Parents lifting children toward imagined suns, frozen in moments of joy that had existed before the universe taught them the cost of survival. Every face bore the same peaceful certainty, every body the same unmarked perfection. A civilization captured at its zenith before fear taught them to hide. Seraphine could not look at them without feeling like an intruder in a museum dedicated to her own failure. They passed through a grand hall. Donovan paused before one carving, a woman holding a child both unmarked and beautiful. "They look different," he said quietly. "From you, I mean. No markings." "They are the untouched," Seraphine replied, her voice carefully neutral. "The people of the first founding lived under a blue sun. They did not need the iron-rich compounds found in darkness. They did not need to hunt. They were scholars, poets, dreamers." She touched the base of the carving with one gloved hand. "We are the descendants of those who survived the burning, the ones who changed to fit the shadows. We are what remains when beauty meets necessity." "That's not," Donovan started. "Save your words, Dr. Thane." Seraphine's markings dimmed to a dull, ashamed gray beneath her hood. "You are about to meet them. You will see for yourself what they think of what we became." They reached a massive circular door at the end of the central hall. It was carved with Umbra script so fine it looked like lace. Donovan's scanner chirped urgently. "The signal is coming from behind this door," he said. "Multiple life signs. 3 distinct signatures. 1 elderly, 1 adult, 1 child. 3 survivors, out of what had once been a colony of thousands. 60 years of dying alone." Seraphine stepped to the door. She placed her palm against the ancient stone and began to sing. Not a war cry, not a command, a lullaby. The same melody her mother had sung to her before the weight of the crown made such gentle things impossible. The door responded. The intricate carvings began to glow with soft white light, responding to frequencies that had not been heard in 2 centuries. Slowly, silently, the massive door slid open. Beyond was a miracle. A 3-story atrium filled with life. Crystal flowers grew in spiraling beds. Trees with silver leaves hummed in the recycled air, their branches heavy with fruit that glowed faintly in the dim light. A fountain bubbled in the center, fed by a reservoir that had somehow maintained pressure through decades of neglect. The air smelled like earth and growth and stubborn, impossible hope. And in the center of the garden, huddled together on a stone bench near the fountain, were the ghosts made flesh. An elderly man with hair like spun glass, translucent and fragile. A woman in her middle years, her face lined with exhaustion and determination in equal measure. A young girl no more than 10 or 11 with eyes the color of pale blue sky. They wore simple white robes stained with soil and time. Their skin was fair and unmarked. They looked like the carvings come to life. They looked like everything Seraphine was not. The elderly man stood up slowly, his legs shaking with effort. He looked at Seraphine, at the warriors in their dark obsidian armor, at the weapons and the sharp edges and the shadows they brought with them. His face twisted into pure, unmitigated terror. "The night drinkers," he rasped, his voice a dry wheeze that suggested water had been scarce for too long. "The monsters have come at last." He pulled the woman and child behind him, his hands clawing at the air, as if he could fight off armed warriors with nothing but desperate love and fear. "The burning didn't finish us, so the shadows came to claim the remains." The words hit Seraphine like physical blows. Her markings, already dim with shame, went completely dull, ash gray, the color of death and endings. She stood frozen at the threshold of the garden, unable to move forward, unable to retreat, unable to do anything but absorb the truth she had always known but tried to deny. Her own people saw her as a monster. She watched the light dance across her palms, at the glowing lines that traced across them, at the obsidian-clad fingers that could tear through steel, at the physical manifestation of 200 years of adaptation and survival. In the throne room alone with statues, she could tell herself that the markings were just different, just adaptation, just survival. Here facing the untouched, seeing the terror in their eyes, she could not lie to herself anymore. She was the corruption. She was the nightmare. She was what they had become when the light abandoned them. No, she whispered, her harmonic voice breaking into discord. We are your people. We are the sovereignty. We heard your call. You are not my people, the old man shouted, his voice gaining a frantic, jagged edge. My people were beings of light. You are the thing we hid from. You are what the darkness made. Get away. Stay back. The little girl began to cry, a thin, high-pitched sound that cut through the garden like a scalpel. Kale's hand moved to his weapon. The other guards shifted their armor, humming with barely contained aggression. They were warriors. They had spent their lives protecting their queen. And now these fragile creatures were calling her a monster. Your Majesty, Kale muttered, his markings flashing dangerous red. We should secure the perimeter. If they cannot see reason... Wait. Donovan stepped forward, moving past the guards, past Seraphine's frozen form. He walked into the center of the atrium with his hands visible, his movements slow and deliberate. Wait just a second. He looked at the old man. My name is Donovan. I'm a human, from the third sector of Earth-controlled space. I know I'm a bit short and I don't glow, but I'm the one who heard your signal. I'm the one who translated the message about the garden dying. The old man blinked, his fear momentarily overridden by confusion. A human from the third sector. Something like that. Donovan offered a small, lopsided smile. And these supposed monsters behind me, they have spent the last 18 hours fighting their way through a death trap of a nebula just to get to you. They didn't come to drink your blood or whatever nightmare scenario you've been imagining. They came because when you screamed into the void for 60 years, they were the only ones who answered. He turned back to Seraphine. She was still standing at the threshold, her hood casting her face in complete shadow, her body language screaming of someone who wanted to turn and run back into the darkness where she belonged. Seraphine, Donovan said, his voice soft but firm. Look at the garden. Look at what they built. Look at what they survived. Seraphine forced herself to look. The crystal flowers, the silver trees, the fountain that had run for 60 years on nothing but hope and engineering. These three people had kept a piece of beauty alive in the middle of a graveyard. They had maintained this sanctuary through decades of isolation that would have broken anyone else. He's right, she said quietly. I am a monster to them. No, Donovan said. You're a survivor. And they are survivors. You're just two different chapters of the same story. He looked at the old man again. She's your queen, not because she looks like the carvings, but because she's the only one in the entire galaxy who was brave enough to remember you. 60 years. Do you really want to stay here and die just because her skin is a different color than yours? The old man stared at Donovan, then at the crying child in his arms, then finally at Seraphine. He saw the way she stood at the threshold, unwilling to enter uninvited. He saw the dull gray of her markings. He saw the trembling in her hands. He saw the tears on her cheeks, crimson tears that glowed faintly in the garden's light. The children, he said finally, his voice cracking, they have never seen the sky. Only the white stone, only the silence. Seraphine sank to her knees. The movement was sudden and graceless, all pretense of royal dignity abandoned. Her heavy cloak pulled around her like a shadow made solid. I will show them the stars. She promised, her voice a low, harmonic thrum that resonated in the garden's very stones. I will show them that the dark is not something to fear. It is a place where we can rest. The old man stepped forward, hesitantly, his hand trembling. He reached out and touched the bioluminescent markings on Seraphine's brow, visible even through the shadow of her hood. She flinched, but she did not pull away. You are so cold, he whispered, like the void itself. But I am here, Seraphine replied. Yes. The man's shoulders sagged as 60 years of burden finally found someone else to help carry the weight. You are here. The moment shattered. An explosion rocked the station. Dust and chips of white stone rained from the ceiling. Emergency klaxons began wailing in frequencies that hurt human ears. Kale's comm crackled to life. All units, we have breach at secondary hangar. Multiple hostiles. Burning court signatures. Estimate 15 minutes before they overrun this sector. Mordain, of course. He had not waited outside the nebula. He had followed them through, using their path as a guide, letting the Obsidian Star take all the risks of navigation while he preserved his forces for the attack. Seraphine was on her feet in an instant. The Morning Queen vanished, replaced by the tactical commander who had held the sovereignty together through 2 centuries of threats. "Gather them," she commanded. Her voice was steel. Kale, full defensive perimeter. Donovan, get to the central archive. Download everything you can. We cannot leave their history behind. The old man clutched the child tighter. "What is happening?" "The people who want to kill you have arrived," Seraphine said bluntly. "We are leaving. Now." The woman, silent until now, stepped forward. "The archives, they contain everything. Our genetic profiles, our cultural records, our—" "I understand." Seraphine looked at Donovan. "How long do you need?" "10 minutes for a basic dump. 20 for everything." Another explosion. Closer this time. The sound of resonance weapons firing in the distance. "You have 12, Seraphine said. "After that, I am dragging you out of here over my shoulder if I have to." Donovan ran. Seraphine turned to Kale. "How many are we facing?" "Boarding parties coming from 3 directions. At least 40 zealots. They are not trying to capture the station. They are trying to destroy it." Seraphine looked at the garden, at the beauty that had survived 60 years, at the crystal flowers and silver trees, and the fountain that still ran clear. Mordain would burn it all, because he could not stand the existence of anything that reminded him of what the Umbra had been before the change, before they became marked, before they became, in his eyes, corrupted. She thought about hiding her markings, about pulling her hood tighter and staying out of sight. Then she thought about the old man's words, "You are the thing we hid from." She had spent 200 years hiding her face, hiding her people, hiding from the galaxy because she was afraid they would see monsters. But the people dying in this station were not the galaxy. They were her responsibility, her people, and they did not need a queen who hid in the shadows. They needed a queen who fought. Seraphine reached up and pulled off her hood. The movement was deliberate, final. The heavy velvet fell to the floor, leaving her face completely exposed. Her bioluminescent markings flared bright, shifting from gray to violent crimson. Her crimson eyes reflected the garden's light, making them look like they were on fire. Kale stared at her. He had served Seraphine for 50 years. In all that time, she had never willingly appeared in public without her hood. "My queen, I am Seraphine," she said, her voice resonating through the garden with harmonic force that made the fountain's water ripple. "High Queen of the Umbra Sovereignty, Keeper of the Silent Gate, Sovereign of the Obsidian Heart." She drew the resonance blade from her belt. The weapon hummed to life, vibrating at frequencies that could shatter steel. "I am a creature of darkness and shadow and cold void. I am every nightmare the galaxy has ever whispered about the Umbra." Her markings blazed like a war drum. "And I will not hide anymore." She turned to Kyle and her guards. "Hold the eastern corridor. Let nothing through. I will take the southern approach." "Alone," Kale's voice was sharp with concern. "No," Seraphine looked at the survivors. "I will have what I came for. 3 souls who need to see that their queen is worth following, even when she looks like a monster." She walked toward the southern corridor, not running, not hiding. Walking with her head high and her face exposed, and her markings burning bright enough to cast shadows on the white stone walls. Behind her, the old man whispered to the woman, "What is she doing?" The woman's voice was equally quiet. "I think she is choosing to be seen." The southern corridor was a killing field. Burning Court zealots in their ash-gray armor poured through breached bulkheads, firing solid slug weapons and crude resonance disruptors. They were not elegant. They were not sophisticated. They were fanatics who believed they were fighting corruption itself. Seraphine met them head-on. She moved like water and lightning combined. The resonance blade in her hands sang its deadly song as she cut through their lines. Her other hand released bursts of harmonic energy that sent zealots flying into walls hard enough to crack armor. She was fast. Impossibly fast. Her Umbra physiology, designed for hunting in zero-gravity environments, made her a blur of motion in the station's standard gravity. But more than her speed or skill, it was her fury that made her unstoppable. Every zealot she faced saw her markings, saw the glowing lines that they had burned off their own skin in acts of self-mutilation, saw the physical proof of what they considered corruption. And Seraphine did not hide it, did not apologize for it, did not try to minimize it. She embraced it. "I am the darkness," she roared, her voice a harmonic weapon that shattered equipment and shook loose ceiling panels. "I am what you hate, I am what you fear, and I am what stands between you and those children." They came at her in waves. She cut them down without mercy. This was not the elegant queen from the throne room. This was the apex predator, the creature that had evolved to survive in the void, the reason why spacers told stories about space vampires in the first place. And it was glorious. Behind her through the chaos, she could hear Donovan's voice over the comm. "Download at 70%. I need 4 more minutes." She would give him 40 if necessary. A zealot rushed her with a vibroblade. Seraphine caught his wrist twisted and threw him into 2 of his companions. They went down in a tangle of limbs and cursing. Another fired a resonance disruptor at point-blank range. The blast should have liquefied her internal organs. Instead, she caught it on her blade, redirecting the harmonics back at the shooter. He collapsed, his own weapon turned against him. More kept coming. Seraphine fought until her muscles screamed, fought until her markings dimmed from exhaustion, fought until the resonance blade's charge ran dry, and she had to resort to close-quarters combat with hands and feet and the desperate strength of someone protecting something precious. "Download complete," Donovan's voice breathless and triumphant. "I have everything. The genetic profiles, the cultural archives, all of it." "Then run," Seraphine commanded. She fell back step by fighting step toward the garden. The zealots pursued, sensing weakness. They were wrong. She was not weak. She was tactical. She led them into the garden atrium. Kale and his guards were waiting. The moment the zealots crossed the threshold, they were caught in a crossfire of resonance weapons. The garden, which had been a sanctuary, became a tomb. The surviving zealots retreated, regrouping for another assault. "We have maybe 5 minutes before they bring heavy weapons," Kale reported. His armor was scorched and dented. One of his markings was bleeding where a blade had cut across his cheek. "We need to evacuate now." Seraphine gathered the child into her arms. The little girl did not scream this time. She buried her face in Seraphine's cloak, tiny hands clutching the fabric. "Move," Seraphine commanded. They ran, through corridors filling with smoke and flame, past carvings that cracked and crumbled as the station's structural integrity failed. Mordain had set demolition charges throughout the Aegis, a final spiteful act of destruction. If he could not have the untouched, no one would. They scrambled back onto the Obsidian Star just as the first charges detonated. The umbilical detached with seconds to spare. Through the viewport, Seraphine watched the Aegis of the sun die. The white stone did not explode in a fireball. It simply came apart. Delicate spires shattered into crystal fragments. The garden's vented atmosphere in frozen clouds. 60 years of survival erased in 60 seconds. The old man stood beside Seraphine, watching his home become debris. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "Do not be." His voice was steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "The Aegis was already dead. We were just ghosts haunting its corpse. You gave us a chance to be alive again." The Obsidian Star turned, preparing to run. The 3 burning quartz ships were regrouping, forming a pursuit formation. And then something massive appeared on the sensors. The Cinder Throne, Mordain's flagship, 3 times the size of the Obsidian Star. Armed with weapons that belonged in fleet engagements, not skirmishes. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer reported. Mordain's scarred face appeared on the view screen. He looked at Seraphine, at her exposed face, at her bright markings. His expression twisted with disgust. "Still parading your corruption, cousin. Still pretending those marks are anything other than proof of our fall." His eyes narrowed. "You have what I need. Surrender the untouched and the genetic data. I will let you flee back to your shadows." "No. Then you will die with them, and your corruption dies with you." The transmission cut. The Cinder Throne fired a massive harpoon of dark energy, not a weapon meant to destroy. A gravity tether designed to drag ships out of warp and hold them immobile for boarding. It caught the Obsidian Star mid-turn. The ship screamed, an organic sound of pure agony as the tether pierced through shields and bit into the hull. The bioluminescent vines overhead turned from blue to violent red. Alarms wailed in frequencies that made Seraphine's bones ache. "We are caught," Kale reported, his voice tight. "They are reeling us in. Boarding pods launching. Estimate 3 minutes until they breach the hull." Seraphine's mind raced through tactical options. They could not fight. The Cinder Throne outgunned them 20-1. They could not outrun the tether. The dark energy field had locked onto the ship's organic core. They had one option: overload the tether. Send a feedback surge so powerful that it would shatter the connection and cripple the Cinder Throne's systems. But the surge would have to be channeled through the Obsidian Star's harmonic core, through the loom heart. And whoever was in the loom when the surge hit would be caught in a discharge powerful enough to stop a human heart. "I will do it," Seraphine said. "My queen, no," Kale started. Donovan was already moving. He was out of his station and running toward the loom chamber before anyone could stop him. "What are you doing?" Seraphine called after him. Donovan didn't answer. He just ran faster. Seraphine abandoned the bridge and chased him. She was faster, her Umbra physiology designed for speed. She caught up to him at the entrance to the loom heart. "Stop," she commanded. "No." Donovan's face was set with stubborn determination. "You are needed on the bridge. You are needed to lead. I am needed to plug a human-shaped gap into an energy conduit and pray my nervous system is too stupid to know it should be dead. You will die. Maybe. Probably. But you know what's definitely going to happen if I don't. Those 3 people we just saved, they are going to become lab experiments for a fanatic who wants to erase his own evolution." Donovan stepped onto the platform in the center of the loom heart. "You said I was brave because I was curious. Well, right now I am extremely curious to see what happens when you plug a human brain into a solar flare." He grabbed the primary filaments before Seraphine could stop him. The world exploded into white. Donovan's scream was the sound of every nerve ending firing at once. His body convulsed as energy meant for ship systems poured through his human nervous system. The translator link at his belt overloaded sparks flying as it tried to process power levels it was never designed to handle. But it worked. The feedback surge traveled back along the dark energy tether, hitting the Cinder Throne like a physical blow. The flagship's shields collapsed. Its weapon systems went dark. Boarding pods that were seconds from launch simply died in their tubes. The tether shattered. The Obsidian Star broke free, spinning wildly away from the crippled vessel. In the loom heart, Donovan collapsed. The filaments released him, and he hit the floor hard. His heart hammered an erratic, failing rhythm. One eye was swollen shut. The other saw double. Everything tasted like copper and burnt ozone. Seraphine was there in seconds. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over his body, not knowing where to touch without causing more damage. "You impossible fool," she whispered. "Don't you dare leave me alone in the dark again." She did what she had never done in 200 years of careful, controlled dignity. She kissed him. Her lips were cold, but her breath was warm. And somewhere in the contact, in the transfer of bioelectric energy that was part of Umbra physiology, Donovan's failing heart found a new rhythm. He gasped, coughed, opened his one working eye. "Did we win?" he croaked. "We are safe," Seraphine said. Crimson tears fell onto his cheek, glowing faintly in the loom's dim light. "The Cinder Throne is adrift. KL is securing the airlocks. We are clear." "Good." Donovan tried to sit up and failed. "Because I think I broke your ship and my brain, and possibly my favorite pair of socks." Seraphine laughed, a sound that was half sob, half genuine mirth. She cradled his head in her lap, her markings shifting to soft gold. "You absolute idiot, Donovan Thane," she whispered. "Yeah," he sighed, closing his eye. "But I'm your idiot." She did not let go of him for 3 hours. The medical bay of the Obsidian Star smelled like crushed mint in humid earth scents that had become synonymous with safety in Donovan's rapidly rewiring understanding of the universe. He lay on a bioluminescent cot that pulsed with gentle warmth while translucent tendrils emerged from the walls to check his vital signs and knit together the torn neural pathways in his brain. His head felt like someone had tried to cram a supernova into a coffee cup. His vision was still glitchy, seeing double whenever he moved his eyes too fast. But the crushing pressure in his chest had subsided into something manageable, into survival. Seraphine had not left his side. She sat in a chair carved from the same dark wood as the furniture in his quarters, her posture rigid with the discipline of someone who had spent decades controlling every visible emotion. But her hood was down. It lay discarded on the floor like a shed skin. Her bioluminescent markings glowed a steady, worried violet, casting soft light across features she no longer bothered to hide. Kale stood in the corner, his obsidian armor scorched and dented from the battle. He was cleaning an energy burn on his forearm with a piece of glowing moss, but his eyes kept drifting to his queen, to the exposed face that he had served for 50 years without ever seeing displayed so openly for so long. "You should rest, my queen," he said quietly. "Dr. Thane is stable. The healers say he will recover fully." "I will rest when he wakes," Seraphine replied without looking up. Her hand rested near Donovan's on the cot, not quite touching, but close enough that he could feel the coolness radiating from her skin. "He saved us," Kale observed, "gave himself to the loom without hesitation, without being asked. He is a fool. He is brave." Seraphine finally looked up at her first shield. Her crimson eyes reflected the bioluminescent light, making them appear to glow from within. "Those are not mutually exclusive qualities, Kale." A small sound from the doorway drew their attention. The three survivors stood at the threshold, uncertain whether they were permitted to enter. Alaric, the elderly man, supported himself on Isolde's arm. Little Wren peeked around them both, her pale blue eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. "Your Majesty," Alaric said, his voice still thin but stronger than it had been in the garden. "Forgive the intrusion. We wanted to see if the human was well. He spoke for us when we could not speak for ourselves." Seraphine gestured them forward. "You are not intruding. This is your ship now as much as mine." They entered slowly, moving like people who had lived in confined spaces for too long. Wren's eyes were immediately drawn to the bioluminescent vines overhead, to the way they shifted and changed color. She reached up with one small hand, fingers stretching toward a glowing leaf. "They respond to touch," Seraphine said softly, "and to song. The ship is a live child. She feels and breathes as we do." Wren looked at Seraphine's face, at the glowing markings that traced across her pale skin like rivers of light. "Your stars are pretty," she said with the brutal honesty of the very young. "Why do you hide them?" Seraphine's markings flickered, unable to settle on a single color. "Because I thought they were ugly. Because I thought people would be afraid." "I was afraid," Alaric said, stepping closer. His translucent hair caught the light from the vines, making him look even more ethereal. "When I saw you in the garden, I saw a nightmare from old stories. I saw the night drinkers who came during the burning and took our people into the dark." "You were not wrong to be afraid," Seraphine replied. "I am what your people became when the universe forced us to choose between changing and dying. We chose to live, but the cost was high. I was wrong about what the cost meant." Alaric reached out with a trembling hand and touched the markings on Seraphine's temple, the same gesture he had made in the garden, but without the terror. "I thought these marks were corruption, proof that you had fallen from grace. But I spent 60 years watching the garden die. I watched good people wither and fade because we could not adapt. We stayed pure, and we died for our purity." His fingers traced the glowing lines with something approaching wonder. "You did not stay pure. You changed. You surreped. And you came back for those of us too stubborn to change ourselves." His voice cracked. "Who is more corrupted, the ones who lived or the ones who chose death over adaptation?" Seraphine had no answer. She simply took his hand and held it, her cold fingers against his warm ones. Donovan stirred on the cot, his eyes open, focusing slowly on the scene before him. Seraphine without her hood, Alaric touching her markings without fear, Wren reaching up to play with the bioluminescent vines while Isolde watched with tears in her eyes. "I missed something important, didn't I?" He mumbled, his voice rough. Seraphine's smile was small but genuine. "You missed the moment when monsters became people. But you are the reason it happened, so I suppose you can be forgiven." 24 hours later, Donovan was well enough to walk under his own power, though he moved like a man who had recently been used as a lightning rod and was still processing the experience. He found Seraphine in the Arboretum, the massive vaulted space where the ship's biological life was at its most vibrant. Sunlight filtered through the obsidian hull into a soft amber glow danced across a forest of silver-leaf trees. In the center, sitting on a patch of moss that looked like green velvet, were Seraphine and Wren. Seraphine's hood lay abandoned on a nearby bench. Her long dark hair flowed freely over her shoulders. Her markings rippled in a rhythmic, playful sequence of bright yellow and green. She held a handful of smooth white stones, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. "No, no," Wren giggled, her voice like clear water over stones. "The queen has to jump the stone over the shadow. If you touch the shadow, you lose your turn. That's the rule." The rules of this shadow jump are surprisingly complex for a game played by children. Seraphine observed, her multi-layered voice filled with a lightness Donovan had never heard before. "It's not for children, it's for everyone," Wren insisted. She reached out and touched Seraphine's hand, her small pale fingers resting against the queen's obsidian-etched skin without hesitation. "Why are your stars moving so fast? Are you excited?" Seraphine froze. She stared at the child's hand on hers, at the contact made without fear or disgust, at the simple acceptance that she had been denied for 200 years. "Yes," Seraphine whispered, her crimson eyes softening into something deep and warm. "I am very excited." Donovan stayed in the shadows of the silver trees watching. He saw Alaric standing a few meters away, his old eyes wet with tears. The elder had spent 60 years believing that the beauty of his people was a fragile thing that would shatter in darkness. Now he watched a queen of shadows play pebbles with the last child of light, and the universe had not ended. Isolde stood beside Alaric, her hand on his shoulder. "All those years we spent afraid of the dark," she said quietly. "All those years convinced that if we just stayed pure enough, stayed isolated enough, help would come. And when it finally did, it wore the face we had been taught to fear most." "We wasted so much time," Alaric replied. "No." Seraphine's voice carried across the arboretum. She had heard them despite the distance. "You survived. That is never a waste. You kept the garden alive. You kept hope alive. You did what you needed to do to endure, just as we did what we needed to do to endure. Different choices. Same courage." Donovan walked forward, his boots crunching softly on the moss. "Am I interrupting a high-stakes pebble tournament?" "Dr. Thane." Seraphine looked up, and the rose-pink glow that flickered briefly across her temples made Donovan's chest tighten. "The healers said you were confined to quarters for another 12 hours. "The healers are plants," Donovan said, sitting down cross-legged on the moss next to Wren. "Very nice plants, but they don't understand human stubbornness. Plus, I heard there was a championship match happening. Couldn't miss it." Wren looked at him seriously. "You have to pay the entry fee, one shiny thing or a good story." Donovan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small copper-plated component he had salvaged from the ruined Hypercom console on Novus Point, the piece of junk that had started everything. In the amber light of the arboretum, it shone like gold. "I've got the shiny thing," he said, placing it in Wren's palm, "and the story is just getting started." They spent 4 hours in that garden. Donovan taught Wren how to use his translator tablet to draw pictures of Earth's oceans. He watched Seraphine explain the harmonic navigation of the obsidian star to Alaric with the patience of a master teacher. He saw Isolde asking Kael about Umbra military tactics with the analytical precision of a scientist who had spent 60 years with nothing but time to think. For 4 hours, space vampires and fragile humans were just people. No titles, no empires, no 60-year-old ghosts. Just survivors trying to figure out what came next. As the Arboretum's artificial sun began to dim, signaling the ship's sleep cycle, Seraphine stood. She looked at the 3 survivors, then at Donovan. "We will reach Novus Point at 0600 tomorrow," she said. "Commander Blackwell has requested a formal debriefing." She sounded agitated. "Blackwell is always agitated," Donovan replied. "If she's not yelling, it means she's planning something worse." Seraphine's expression shifted. The playful warmth faded, replaced by something more serious. "Before we dock, there is something I must tell you all. The data cores that Dr. Thane recovered contain more than cultural archives." She pulled up a holographic display from her personal interface. Genetic sequences scrolled through the air complex and beautiful in their mathematical precision. These are the complete genetic profiles of the first founding, the template of what the Umbra were before the change. Before we developed the bioluminescent markings, before we needed to synthesize iron from gas giants to survive. Isolde stepped forward, her eyes scanning the data with immediate understanding. This is everything, the entire baseline genome. With this you could—" She trailed off, her face going pale. "We could attempt to reverse the change," Seraphine finished quietly. "We could use genetic therapy to remove the markings, to make ourselves look like the carvings again, to become the untouched." The Arboretum fell silent. Alaric's voice was careful. "Is that what you want, Your Majesty?" Seraphine studied her palms, at the glowing lines that traced across them, at the obsidian nails and pale skin, and all the physical proof of 200 years of adaptation. "3 days ago, I would have said yes without hesitation," she admitted. "I have spent my entire life looking at statues and wishing I could be what we were, wishing I could erase these marks and be beautiful like my ancestors." "And now?" Isolde asked. Seraphine picked up Ren, settling the child on her hip with the ease of someone who had spent lifetimes caring for their people. "Now I understand that these patterns tell the story of ancestors who chose life over purity, adaptation over extinction. They are proof that when the universe tried to kill us, we refused to die." She looked at Alaric. "You asked who is more corrupted, the ones who lived or the ones who chose death. But that is the wrong question. The right question is who has the courage to be what they are instead of what they wish they were." Her markings flared bright violet, then settled into a steady, proud gold. "I am Seraphine. I am marked and in cold and built for darkness. And I am done apologizing for surviving." The proximity alarm shattered the moment. Kael's voice came through the ship-wide communication system, urgent and tight. "All hands to battle stations. We have incoming transmission. It's the Cinder Throne." On the bridge, Mordaine's scarred face filled the view screen. Half of it was now burned away completely, a mass of raw tissue and exposed bone. The feedback surge that had crippled his ship had nearly killed him, but fanatics were hard to kill. "Still alive, cousin." His voice was a rasping whisper, his harmonic resonance completely gone. "You are harder to exterminate than I expected. But then corruption always is." "What do you want, Mordaine?" Seraphine stood at the command dais, hood down, face fully exposed. "Your ship is crippled. Your forces scattered. You have lost." "Have I?" Mordaine's remaining eye gleamed with manic intensity. "You think this was about the station, about capturing those 3 fragile ghosts?" "No, cousin. This was always about proving a point." He leaned forward. "If I cannot have the untouched, if I cannot use them to reverse our curse, then I will ensure no one can. I have loaded a genetic targeting pathogen into an automated probe. It is already launched. In 8 hours, it will reach the Obscura Reach and deploy." Seraphine felt ice crystallize in her veins. "What does it target?" "The untouched genome, the pure baseline genetic sequence." Mordaine smiled with half a mouth. "Anyone carrying those markers will die within minutes of exposure. Your 3 precious survivors. Any other lost colonies still hiding in the Reach. Anyone with untouched DNA in their system." He gestured to the data cores visible on Seraphine's station. "You have their genetic profiles, you could synthesize vaccines, countermeasures, but you will not have time. The probe is already approaching the nebula's edge. In 8 hours it will activate, and the last pure bloodline of our people will be extinct." The transmission cut. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Officers shouting reports. Kael pulling up tactical displays. Donovan frantically calculating intercept trajectories. "We cannot catch it," Kael reported, his markings flashing desperate red. "The probe is moving too fast. By the time we reach interception range, it will already be in the nebula." "Then we redirect it," Seraphine said. "My queen, the energy requirements." "I know what they are." Seraphine was already moving toward the loom heart. "Prepare the harmonic resonance at maximum output. We are going to use the nebula's natural frequencies to push the probe off course." Donovan grabbed her arm. "Last time we did this, I nearly died. This time with higher power over a longer duration." "I am not asking you to do it, Donovan." His eyes widened. "You can't. Your biology is stronger than human, but the discharge will hurt significantly." Seraphine removed his hand gently. "But I will survive. We evolved to withstand extreme conditions. You did not." "The Council," Kael interjected. "They should vote on this. The risk to the Crown." "Summon them." 10 minutes later, the Council appeared via a holographic link. 12 Umbra nobles, their faces ranging from concerned to horrified, as they realized what Seraphine was proposing. Absolutely not, Council Member Thren said immediately. His markings blazed authoritative crimson. Your Majesty, you are asking to risk your life for 3 survivors in theoretical colonies that may not even exist. I am not asking, Seraphine replied calmly. I am informing you of my decision. Then we overrule it. Thren looked to the other council members. We have the authority in matters of royal safety. We vote to surrender the survivors to Mordaine's demands. 3 lives are not worth risking the Queen. And if there are more colonies in the Reach, Seraphine asked, worse survivors we have not found yet, the probe will kill them all. Then they die, another council member said bluntly. They have been dead to us for 200 years anyway. What difference does it make? Seraphine stared at the holographic faces of people she had led for decades, people she had protected, people who were now calmly discussing the acceptable losses of genocide. You want to know what difference it makes? Her voice was quiet, dangerous. The difference is that for 200 years we have hidden in the dark because we were afraid. Afraid of being seen, afraid of being judged, afraid of being exactly what Mordaine calls us. Corrupted, monstrous, wrong. She stepped forward, her markings blazing so bright they cast shadows across the bridge. Those people in the obscure Reach are not corrupted. They are us before fear made us small. They are proof that we were beautiful once, that we could be beautiful again not by erasing our marks, but by remembering why we survived. Your Majesty, Thren started. I am going to the Loom Heart, Seraphine interrupted. I am going to redirect that probe. And when I return, we are going to discuss exactly what kind of people we want to be. The ones who hide in the dark, or the ones who step into the light and dare the universe to see us as we are. She turned to Kaio. If the Council attempts to interfere with ship operations, you have my permission to lock them out of all systems. My queen, Kaio's markings glowed proud gold. It will be my honor. Seraphine walked to the Loom Heart. Donovan followed her. You don't have to come, she said. I know, but I'm the one with experience in getting electrocuted by ancient alien technology. Figured I could offer moral support. Maybe take notes for the academic paper I'll never be able to publish because it's classified. Despite everything, Seraphine smiled. You are impossible. You keep saying that like it's a bad thing. They entered the spherical chamber together. The gossamer filaments hung from the ceiling like frozen rain, shifting with soft light. The central platform waited warm and alive and terrifying. Seraphine removed her cloak. Beneath it, she wore the tactical bodysuit from the battle still scorched in places from resonance fire. She stepped onto the platform. How long do I have to hold the connection, she asked. 12 minutes, Donovan replied, checking his calculations. Maybe 15 if the probe has defensive maneuvering. The surge needs to be sustained long enough to create a stable harmonic field that will push it into the gas giant's gravity well. 12 to 15 minutes of channeling enough energy to power a small city through my nervous system. Yes, that will hurt. Immensely. Seraphine looked at him. Her crimson eyes held no fear, only determination. If I do not survive this, tell Alaric and the others that I am glad I found them. Tell them that seeing Ren play in the garden made 200 years of hiding worthwhile. Tell them yourself, Donovan said firmly. You're going to make it through this. You sound very certain. I am, because you're Seraphine, and you don't hide anymore. She smiled. Then she grabbed the primary filaments. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Seraphine felt the ship's consciousness flood into her own. Every sensor, every system, every living cell of the Obsidian Star became an extension of her awareness. She could feel the probe 4 light-years away and closing on the nebula. She could feel the veil of whispers itself, the churning mass of ki and gravity and possibility. She began to sing. Her voice started as a low harmonic resonating through the loom's chamber. The filaments responded, brightening. The ship's entire organic structure began to vibrate in sympathy. On the bridge, the crew joined her song. Their voices merged with hers, building a harmonic structure so complex it seemed to bend reality itself. The Obsidian Star reached out across light years of space, touching the nebula with nothing but sound and will. The gas clouds began to respond, their natural frequencies aligning with the ship's song. Seraphine pushed. The nebula pushed back. She adjusted the harmonics. The nebula shifted. A wave of gravitational force rippled through the veil of whisper, invisible but immense. The probe detected the anomaly. It tried to compensate, but Seraphine was faster. She sang louder, pouring more power into the connection. The filaments burned against her skin. Her markings flared white-hot. Every nerve in her body screamed protest, but she did not let go. On the bridge, Donovan watched the tactical display. The probe's trajectory was shifting, slowly, degree by degree, being pushed by a harmonic wave that should not be possible. "It's working," he whispered. Seraphine heard him through the connection. She smiled even though smiling hurt, even though breathing hurt, even though every atom of her being was on fire. She pushed harder. The probe's course changed dramatically, no longer aimed at the nebula's interior, now spiraling toward the massive gas giant on the reach's edge. 15 minutes. That was how long she held the connection. 15 minutes of sustained agony that felt like hours. The probe hit the gas giant's atmosphere. The pathogen burned up in methane storms that raged with the force of 1,000 hurricanes. The threat was gone. Seraphine released the filaments. She collapsed, but she did not fall unconscious. Her umbra physiology, forged in darkness, in extremity, kept her aware even as her body trembled with exhaustion. Her markings had gone completely dull, a flat gray that looked like ash. Donovan was there immediately. He cradled her head, his hands gentle, despite the urgency. "Stay with me," he said. "Seraphine, stay with me." "I am here," she whispered. Her voice was a single note, the harmonic resonance temporarily burned away. Did it work?" "Probe is destroyed, pathogen neutralized. You did it." Seraphine laughed. It was a weak, broken sound, but genuine. "I am the darkness, Donovan, and the darkness is strong." "Yes, you are." He helped her sit up. "Can you stand?" "Eventually. Give me a moment to remember how legs work." It took 20 minutes before she could walk. When she finally emerged from the loom yard, supported by Donovan on one side and Kale on the other, the entire crew stood at attention. Their markings glowed in perfect synchronization. Gold. Proud and glowing gold. They did not speak. They did not need to. The harmonic resonance that filled the ship said everything. Their queen had stood in the fire, and she had not burned. The obsidian star docked at Novus Point without ceremony. No sparks, no coffee spills, just the smooth, organic connection of living ship to metal station. Commander Reese Blackwell waited in the docking bay with her security detail. She looked like she had aged a decade in the weeks since Seraphine's departure. Her uniform was still crisp, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had spent too many sleepless nights explaining to Earth Command why she had allowed a civilian linguist to board an alien vessel. The airlock opened. Seraphine walked through first, without her hood. Her bioluminescent markings rippled a steady, confident blue. Her crimson eyes met Blackwell's without flinching. She stood tall, shoulders back, every inch the queen she had been born to be. Behind her came the survivors. Alaric Isolde and Ren, wearing clean clothes provided by the Obsidian Star's stores. They looked stronger, fed, cared for. Donovan came last, looking rumpled and exhausted and impossibly pleased with himself. Blackwell stared at Seraphine's exposed face, at the survivors, at the human who had left as a failed academic and returned as something else entirely. "Commander," Seraphine said, her harmonic voice resonating through the docking bay, "I bring you 3 survivors from a lost colony, complete genetic archives of the first founding, and a proposal for a permanent research alliance between the Umbra Sovereignty and Earth Command." Blackwell blinked. "Your Majesty, Earth Command has been demanding explanations. There are 17 subcommittees asking questions. I'm probably going to be court-martialed for this entire incident. Then I suppose it is fortunate that I have diplomatic immunity to offer." Seraphine gestured to Donovan. "Dr. Thane has agreed to serve as official liaison between our peoples. He will handle the technical explanations. I will handle the politics. You simply need to provide the venue and the terrible coffee." "You want coffee?" Blackwell looked like the universe had finally broken her understanding of cause and effect. "I am told it is a weapon of diplomatic necessity. Seraphine replied with a faint smile. And after the week I have had, I believe I have earned the right to experience it for myself. The debriefing lasted 18 hours. It involved more holographic conferences than Donovan thought physically possible. Lawyers, diplomats, scientists, military advisors. Everyone wanted to know everything. Seraphine sat through it all without her hood. Let them see her markings. Let them see her crimson eyes. Let them see exactly what the Umber sovereignty looked like when it decided to stop hiding. By the end, the space vampires were no longer a myth. They were a recognized sovereign nation with a formal diplomatic presence. Novus Point, the forgotten research station at the edge of nowhere, became the most important archaeological site in human history. And Seraphine became the face of a people who had finally decided to be seen. Late that night, after the politicians had signed their preliminary treaties and the survivors were settled into temporary quarters on Novus Point, Donovan found himself back in the linguistics bay. The ruined console had been replaced. A fresh mug of Sint Calf sat on the desk, still steaming. He was not alone. Seraphine stood at the viewport looking out at the infinite stars. She wore a simple tunic instead of her formal regalia. Her hood lay abandoned on his desk. Her markings shifted with a soft, contemplative violet. "The Sovereignty fleet has arrived to escort the survivors home," she said without turning. "We depart at midnight." Donovan felt his chest tighten. Back to the spire. Back to responsibilities. To the council. To the weight of the crown. She turned to face him. "But I wanted to ask you something first, Dr. Thane." "Donovan, please. I think we're past titles at this point." "Donovan." She stepped closer. "Would you consider joining the Sovereignty as our official human liaison and translator? You are the only one who can read the old dialect without a translator link. And someone needs to make sure I do not accidentally break your database systems. You still have not figured out the double enter function." Donovan laughed. "That was one time. And in my defense, your operating system is based on harmonic resonance, which is not exactly intuitive for someone who grew up with keyboards. So you will come." He looked around the linguistics bay. At the career he had built out of failure and exile. At the safe, boring life of cataloging dead languages for audiences who did not care. Then he looked at Seraphine, at the queen who had learned to stop hiding, at the impossible adventure that had started with a coffee spill. "I've spent my life studying the dead," he said quietly. "Time to live with the living." Seraphine's markings flared brilliant rose pink. "Then it is settled. Just one condition," Donovan added. "When we get back to the spire, I want to see the gallery of the first, the statues you told me about. I want to understand what they meant to you." "Why?" "Because I want to see what you saw when you looked at them, and then I want to show you what I see when I look at you." Seraphine was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped close enough that Donovan could feel the coolness radiating from her skin. "What do you see, Donovan Thane?" He reached up and touched the bioluminescent markings on her temple. They brightened under his fingers, warm despite her cold skin. "I see someone who stopped hiding," he said. "I see someone who chose to be what she is instead of what she wished she was." "The statues are beautiful, Seraphine, but they are frozen, perfect and unchanging and dead." His hand moved to cup her cheek. "You are alive. You are marked and scarred and built for darkness. And there is nothing more beautiful than someone who survives and refuses to apologize for it." She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet with crimson tears. "The flaws are where the light gets in," she whispered. "Exactly." She kissed him. Not the desperate, life-saving kiss in the loom heart. This was something else. Something chosen. Something that tasted like possibility and new beginnings and the particular courage it takes to be truly seen. When they finally pulled apart, Seraphine was smiling. A real smile, unguarded and free. "For science," she asked. "For science," Donovan agreed. 1 month later, Seraphine stood before the full Umber Council in the great throne room of the Obsidian Spire. She wore her formal regalia, the flowing cloak of dark velvet, the ceremonial armor etched with the history of her people, the crown of living obsidian that shifted with bioluminescent light. But her hood was down. Her face was completely exposed. Her markings glowed a steady, proud violet. Her crimson eyes swept across the assembled nobles without shame or apology. Beside the throne, on a smaller seat crafted specifically for the occasion, sat Ren. The child wore robes of white silk, a bridge between the old and the new. She swung her legs cheerfully unbothered by the weight of ceremony. On Seraphine's other side stood Donovan wearing formal diplomatic attire that looked only slightly ridiculous on someone who had spent most of his career in coffee-stained lab coats. He was no longer just a linguist. He was Ambassador Thane, official liaison between the sovereignty and Earth Command. Kale stood at attention near the dais, his armor polished to mirror, shine his markings glowing proud gold. Alaric and Isolde sat in the gallery reserved for honored guests, their white robes stark against the dark stone of the throne room. The council members watched it all with expressions ranging from approval to barely concealed horror. Seraphine did not care. She stood and addressed her people. For 200 years, she began, her harmonic voice resonating through the vast chamber. We have lived in silence. We withdrew from the galaxy because we feared what they would see when they looked at us. We hid our faces. We concealed our markings. We convinced ourselves that invisibility was the same as safety. She paused, letting the words settle. But silence is not safety. It is a bookway, and we have been prisoners long enough. She gestured to the survivors. These 3 people spent 60 years calling for help, 60 years screaming into the void while we stayed hidden because we were afraid to answer. They did not give up. They did not surrender to despair. They survived with nothing but hope and stubbornness. Her markings brightened. And when I finally heard them, when I finally went to bring them home, do you know what I was most afraid of? I was afraid they would look at me and see a monster. I was afraid my own people would reject me because I had changed, because I bore the marks of survival. She looked directly at Council Member Thren, who had voted to surrender the survivors. And I was right. They were terrified. They called me Night Drinker. They called me Corruption Made Flesh. They saw every fear and every nightmare they had been taught to believe about what we became. Seraphine stepped down from the dais. She walked toward the statues of the first that lined the throne room. Perfect, unmarked, beautiful. I spent my life looking at these statues and wishing I could be what they were, wishing I could erase my marks and be pure again, be beautiful again. She touched the base of the nearest statue, but I was asking the wrong question. The question is not, how do we become what we were? The question is, what do we want to be next? She turned back to face the council. I am Seraphine. I am marked and cold and built for darkness. My skin glows with patterns that prove my ancestors refused to die when the universe abandoned them. My eyes are crimson because we learned to see in wavelengths that most species cannot perceive. My hands are clawed because we needed to survive in zero gravity. Her voice rose, filling every corner of the vast room. These are not scars of corruption. These are the language of endurance. They are proof that when faced with extinction, we chose life. We chose adaptation. We chose to become something new, rather than disappear trying to remain something old. She looked at Ren, who was watching with wide, understanding eyes. This child touched my markings and called them pretty, not despite the glow, but because of it. She saw beauty where I saw shame. She saw strength where I saw weakness. She saw exactly what we are, survivors who carry our own light. Seraphine's markings blazed so bright they cast shadows across the throne room. I stand before you today without my hood, without apology, without shame. I am the Queen of Shadows, and I am done hiding in them. She raised her hand and the holographic display activated. Images from the rescue mission, the Veil of Whispers, the Aegis of the Sun, the battle with the burning quartz, the moment when she had stood in the loom and redirected the probe. All of it captured and preserved. This is what we can be, she said. Mother statues not frozen in perfection, but alive, growing, changing, surviving. She looked at each council member in turn. The galaxy will see us now. They will know we exist. They will see our markings and our differences and our strangeness. And yes, some will call us monsters. She smiled, a fierce, predatory smile that showed her sharp teeth. But we will show them that monsters are a myth. We will show them that the marks on our skin are not corruption but courage. We will show them that the darkness did not defeat us. It taught us how to carry our own light. The throne room fell silent. Then Kael began to hum, a low harmonic note of support and pride. One by one, the other warriors joined him, then the corridors, then the council members themselves, even the ones who had opposed her. The harmonic chorus rose, filling the spire with sound that made the organic walls pulse with light. Seraphine closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. It was acceptance. It was support. It was the sound of a people deciding to be seen. When the song finally faded, she opened her eyes and looked at Donovan. He was grinning like an idiot, tears streaming down his face. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed," he said. "It was necessity," Seraphine replied. "But I am glad you found beauty in it." "I find beauty in you," he said simply. Ren tugged on Seraphine's cloak. "Can we go back to the garden now? I want to show Alaric the new flowers that bloomed." Seraphine laughed. She picked up the child and settled her on her hip. "Yes, let us go to the garden. Let us see what grows in the light." As they walked through the corridors of the spire, Seraphine realized that she was not walking alone. Donovan walked beside her. Kale followed a respectful distance behind. Alaric and Isolde joined them, their white robes flowing beside her dark ones. They passed other Umbra in the halls, courtiers and warriors and scholars, and Seraphine noticed something she had never seen before. Younger Umbra, seeing their queen walking with her hood down, began to lower their own hoods. Slowly at first, tentatively, but then with increasing confidence. By the time Seraphine reached the garden, half the spire was walking with their faces exposed. Bioluminescent markings shifted in patterns of violet and in gold, and rose pink, a symphony of light in the darkness. Seraphine stood at the entrance to the garden and looked back at her people, at the faces she had never seen, at the courage that had been waiting for permission to be brave. "This is what I wanted you to see," she said to Donovan. "This is the light that was hidden in the darkness." He took her hand, her cold skin against his warm, marked and unmarked, different but together. "No," he said gently, "you are the light that was hidden in the darkness. They are just reflections of your courage." In the garden, Ren was already teaching Alaric the rules of shadow, jump. Isolde was examining the silver trees with scientific fascination. Kale stood guard at the entrance, his markings glowing content amber. Seraphine settled onto the moss beside them all. She removed her crown and set it aside. Without the weight of it, she felt lighter, more herself. Donovan sat beside her. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About which part?" "The coffee spill that started an intergalactic incident, the rescue mission into a deadly nebula, the multiple near-death experiences, or the decision to abandon 200 years of hiding. Any of it, all of it." Seraphine looked at the garden, at the life that thrived in the light, at the people who had finally stopped hiding. She traced the branching patterns on her palms, the glowing lines that had once been a source of shame. Now they rippled with steady, proud light. "No regrets," she said. "Not anymore." She leaned against Donovan's shoulder, comfortable with the contact, comfortable with being seen. "I spent my life looking at mirrors and seeing monsters," she said quietly. "I looked at my markings and saw corruption. I looked at my people and saw what we had lost. I looked at the statues and saw perfection we could never achieve." "And now," Donovan asked. "Now I look in the mirror and I see a survivor. I see someone who refused to die. I see someone who carries scars that prove she was strong enough to heal." She watched the light dance across her wrist. "These are not corruption. They are a language. They tell the story of how my ancestors faced the void and learned to speak its dialect." She looked up at him. "The light does not exist to erase the dark, Donovan. It exists to show us that the darkness is where we grow, where we become strong, where we learn to carry our own illumination." "That's beautiful," he said. "That is survival," she corrected. "But I suppose they can be the same thing." In the garden, Ren laughed. The sound echoed off the silver trees, pure and bright and full of hope. Alaric was crying again, but this time with joy. "I never thought I would hear a child's laughter again," he said. "I never thought I would see growth and light and future." "You have it now," Seraphine said, "in all of you. The Aegis is gone, but the garden continues. Different, changed, but alive." She stood and addressed them all. "We are not the statues. We are not frozen in perfection. We are growing things, living things. We are the garden that refuses to die even when the universe tries to kill it." Her markings brightened to brilliant gold. And I, for one, am tired of apologizing for blooming in the dark. Donovan stood beside her. He raised his coffee mug, still filled with the terrible scent calf that had started everything. To blooming in the dark, he said. Seraphine smiled. She took the mug from his hand and raised it high. To blooming in the dark, she echoed, and to the courage it takes to be seen. She took a sip of the coffee, her face twisted in disgust. This is truly awful, she said. I know, Donovan replied, but it changed the universe. Sometimes the worst things create the best outcomes. Seraphine looked at him, at the clumsy human who had spilled coffee and accidentally summoned a queen, who had seen markings and called them beautiful, who had looked at monsters and seen only people. Sometimes they do, she agreed. She set the coffee mug in the center of the garden table. Not on the edge where it might spill, in the center, stable, safe, deliberate. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. She had spent 200 years living at the edge, hiding, afraid of falling, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of being seen. Now she stood in the center, visible, vulnerable, alive. The obsidian star hummed in its dock, preparing for the next journey. The sovereignty waited for its queen's return. The galaxy spread infinite before them, full of possibility and danger and wonder. But in the garden in that moment, there was only peace. Seraphine looked at the people around her, marked and unmarked, old and young, human and umbra, all survivors in their own way, all beautiful in their survival. She closed her eyes and let herself feel the warmth of the bioluminescent light. Let herself be seen. Let herself be alive. And for the first time in 200 years, the darkness felt like home. Not a cage, not a hiding place, just another part of the garden, where the light had learned to grow.